Good afternoon, everyone. We are on time. Some people are still coming, but I think we should start because we have little time for the quality of the speakers that we have today. So my name is Leonardo Cervera. I'm the Secretary General of the European Data Protection Supervisor, which, as you know, is the EU authority in charge traditionally of data protection, compliance by EU institutions and bodies. And since August 2024, we are also the authority in charge of compliance with the EU AI Act. So I think as soon as we have a supervisor appointed, one of my recommendations would be that I think we should change the name, because we are not only now the Data Protection Authority, we are also the AI Authority, and this doesn't look like in our name. So I'm super happy to be here with all of you, such a distinguished audience, and in what the former supervisor Giovanni Buttarelli used to call the Olympic Games of data protection. And here we have several athletes today, which are remarkable. They have come from all Greek cities, from the Peloponnese, from all the nice places where athletes come from. And I'm going to introduce them to you very briefly, although they don't really need presentation, but just in case. But before we go there, let me just tell you that from the EDPS, we are very grateful to CPDP for the great cooperation that we have with this conference over the years. I think we've been here since the very beginning. And we are very grateful that they allow us to organize this kind of events, discussions with such distinguished speakers, because our job as a public organization is to create public value. That's what we are here for. We are not here to do enforcement or to do policy or to do, at the end of the day, our role is to create public value. And there could be no better way of creating public value than to put some brilliant minds together on a stage so they can speak freely and frankly about the huge challenges that we have today, all of us as human beings, with technology, with regulation, geopolitics. I just come from the presentation of Marisha's book. I hope you all have it now, which is great. I hope you can dedicate it to me afterwards. And there we were talking about many of these things. And here I have some books for you, dear colleagues, as well, for you. It's a commemorative book we brought, many of us, maybe some of the authors. I'm sure some of the authors are already in the audience. 20 years of data protection, 20 years of the European Data Protection Supervisor. We just turned 20. We are not teenagers anymore. So without further ado, let me just present you very briefly our speakers. I should start with Marisha Jaque, who is our only lady. So you saved the gender quota. Thank you very much for that. And she has been a politician, European politician, for many years. We all knew her on this category, on this nature. And now she's in the other side of the pond, and on the other coast of the pond. She's in Stanford, still doing what she was doing, but on American territory. She's really advocating human policies for technology. And I will not bore you with all her achievements, but she has a monthly column for the Financial Times. She serves in the UN as an AI advisor. She's published this book and many other things. And I will stop here. She's an incredible speaker, as you will be able to see in a minute. Then let me move to a compatriot, Ignacy Belda, who is the authority, AI authority in my home country, Spain. Ignacy is an engineer, computer scientist, holds 2 doctorate degrees, a real expert on artificial intelligence. He's being also the CEO of the Barcelona Science Park, and he's also been funding businesses, companies, and he's also an expert in business administration, finances. Amazing. So I'm very proud that Spain, we've managed to appoint someone as qualified as Ignacy for a job of that responsibility. There is always the risk that we get a politician. Well, Ignacy is not. Ignacy is a real computer scientist, expert, and someone who really understands the business. Then, moving to the younger person in the stage, is Markus Wuschenbaum. You can correct me, please.
Wünschelbaum.
Voilà, you see? So Markus works for one of the regional data protection authorities in Germany. You know, Germany is famous for having lots of authorities and data protection, and also is famous for having loads of data protection experts. I think half of the DPOs in Europe are in Germany. And we've been in contact with Markus on a professional level, and she's doing super interesting research, public research, that I thought it would be really, really important that he shares with you. He serves as a policy and digital strategy advisor for the Hamburg's Data Protection Commissioner. And last but not least, we have someone from the private sector, someone from business, Julian Sharka, who is the CEO of one of these rare things, which is to an European company trying to compete and to try to occupy some space in the world of AI. He's the CEO of a company called iGenius, and probably with a little bit of luck, one of the European unicorns in the field of AI. And I think it would be essential that I thought when I invited him, that we give him the floor and we give him the opportunity to explain how we can all support this endeavor of some brave European companies that are trying to do things in the world of AI and do it the European way, hopefully. So that's why he's here today. So after this brief presentation, I'm going to make a warm-up question to them, so they can basically say whatever they want. And then we will have more specific questions for you, more addressed to your particular expertise. So the first question is just an excuse to give you the floor. Is how do you assess the current landscape in the world of AI, and what will be the challenge or the opportunity that you foresee in the near future? So let's start with Marietje, please.
Thank you very much. You managed to make me blush before I even started talking, so this is this is very kind of you. Thank you. We can look at the role of AI in geopolitics as one example of a very prominent way in which AI shows up these days, where even if AI policy and AI politics have been a relatively new field, we've already seen dramatic changes. So what was remarkable, particularly after the release of ChatGPT by OpenAI, was that the world over, governments thought, we have a role to play here, this is deeply impactful technology, let us not make the mistake of waiting too long, as we have with social media. And so we saw a moment of convergence, whether it was in the G7, the US, Europe, the African Union, the Council of Europe, you name it. There was talk about AI preventing harms, ensuring security, and that moment didn't last long. because as a sort of landmark moment during the AI summit in Paris a few months ago, we heard the US Vice President cautioning Europe not to regulate, saying that the US wants AI uptake the American way, that rules get in the way of innovation, and sort of as a symbolic gesture of the break of this moment of global unity was that the US and the UK did not want to sign the final declaration. And so, the US is stepping away from ambitions with regard to regulating AI, and that, of course, has deep ripple effects around the world because so many of the most impactful companies are in the US. So that's sort of one pillar of what's going on. Between companies, there is, of course, fierce competition. And we've already seen how that competition has led to foregoing of security and risk assessments, because when DeepMind saw that ChatGPT was released by OpenAI, it also released its generative AI because it didn't want to lose out in the competition field. And so companies are by and large deciding when they are releasing new models and applications. And that means that we are all subject to a lot of experimentation with this impactful technology, because even CEOs of the largest AI companies that produce generative AI, such as Anthropic, are saying things like, nobody really understands how this technology does what it does. There's a high level of unpredictability, even to the world's most renowned experts. And so, not to speak too long, but to just sort of lay out a few pointers here, I think we are at the very early stages of both seeing where generative AI will take us and seeing where regulatory guardrails will take the world. And between the EU and the US, we will now soon really see what that means for people. Because the EU has the AI Act, which you will oversee, and good luck with that. But it actually is a binding law that has the ambition to prevent risk with mitigating measures that are necessary if companies want to offer their AI in the EU. It's a risk-based model. We can talk more about whether that's the right approach or not, but that's been chosen by the legislators. While in the US, only existing law might apply to AI. There may be initiatives from individual states, but on the federal level, there's no binding law around AI. And so we can see in real time what the experience will be for American AI users versus European AI users, the way we can already see that the experience for example, Chinese AI users is different because of the laws that are on the books there. So it is a very dynamic field about which the last word has not been said, not about which companies will win, even though some are very well positioned, not about which regulatory model will prevail. It's very dynamic and very confrontational in many ways, competition throughout.
Thank you very much. I like to quote this Cicero, who 55 years before Christ was born, told this thing of historia magistra vitae est. History is the teacher of life. So if we want to know what is going to happen in the future, we just need to look at what happened in the world of technology 20 or 30 years ago. And we probably, as you do in your book, I understand, can extract or forecast some of the things that are going to happen. So I would like to now to give the floor to Julian to tell us the perspective from an European company struggling to make their stance in this world of AI. What do you advise? What do you think we should do in order to support efforts like yours?
Thank you very much for having me. I think after 8 years in this space, the number one thing to say is look beyond the hype, because when you do that, there is a different world beyond the reality distortion. What's happening behind the scenes is not a technological revolution, is a social revolution where AI, generative AI more specifically, has become an instrument to actually create new monopolies and to create wealth. So when we started the company back in 2016, we thought that this was the user interface revolution. So it's all about humans talking to machines. And then we went back and, as we were developing it, we said, no, this is not like the age of information with the web. This is more like the birth of the personal computer. But after 8 years nowadays, we compare this revolution in order to understand it with the printed press revolution. So this brings us back to Gutenberg more than 500 years ago. So I think in order to predict the future, this is how we should look at this technology. Because if we look at what it does, it is the most simplest invention in the world of software, which is now the operating system of the world. So we're talking about vectors, numbers saved into a file. So if you look at a generative AI model, which is being described in a very alien way, the artifact, it's like a Word file that has a copy-paste of more than 10 trillion words into it, with a sophisticated algorithm called the transformer that is able to connect these words based on what we type in. Then this applies in a similar way for images and videos. So how can that simplicity be autonomous? How can that be so difficult to understand and to regulate? It is clearly being instrumentalized. So how does this place with Europe? And how does this stops, for example, us going from a unicorn to a decacorn or even dream to build a 1 trillion euros business in the European landscape? Well, first of all, we have a problem in terms of culture in Europe. So every time we deal with investors, everyone wants to copy the US. Everyone wants to follow. And Europe has never been able to achieve that dream. Because in order to follow, in order to copy, you need the same capital, you need the same tools. But it is not going to work anyways, because we have a different culture. So what we did at iGenius, after doing a lot of research and development on these concepts, because we choose to build in Europe. Building in Europe is a choice. It is hard, it comes with pain, with blood and tears. It's not about, complaining that is more difficult, we don't have the same conditions of Silicon Valley. We do have leadership in other industries, we just have to admit that we don't have leadership in this industry. Some ecosystems were faster and better than us at building this technology. So we believe that this should not be just about competition, this should be about turning this technology into a fundamental human right. Because if we compare it with the printed press revolution, this is going to be the age of intelligence. And the knowledge revolution brings me to privacy and intellectual property. So the privacy and intellectual property revolution will define our individual freedom in the future. Democracy will depend on it. So this is high stakes. So then the question is, why is Europe not building it? So after our experience, trying to raise capital in Europe, trying to build in Europe, we came to the conclusion that it's just a matter of capital. And it's not a matter of human capital. We do have the data, we do have the talent. We started in 2016 until 2023, we were playing with small models because we didn't have enough capital. We just got about 100 million. And in 1 year, we built a 355 billion parameter model, LLM, which now supports 50 languages. It's state-of-the-art, is among the top 6 in the world. It's currently the most performant LLM in Europe. We did that just because we got access to more compute. So the lesson learned with this past 16 months of work with generative AI is that the future of European AI depends on compute. It doesn't depend on data, it doesn't depend on talent, it's just one raw material, compute. Once you have that, then it's all about how you're going to build. We believe that Europe should build the brand of trust around AI. And this is where I believe the community in this room plays a key role. Because if it is true that this is the intellectual property revolution, it's impossible to imagine that a dozen companies should own and must own the intellectual property of every economy in the world. Because if we centralize AI, if we don't regulate AI, this is what's going to happen. Every company, every individual that is using LLMs these days, owned by companies that serve them as a centralized system, as a black box, is literally exporting their intellectual property for free to the companies that own the LLM. Why is this happening? Because this is a different type of software, and I will end with that. So with traditional software and the previous generation of software, you could use a CRM, you could use an ERP or whatever data management tool. If you don't like it anymore, you export your data, you're protected by the rule of law, and you bring it to another system. Well, with generative AI, that has changed fundamentally, because putting data into an LLM is like putting sugar into a cake. Once you've baked it, either you eat the cake or your data is gone forever. So imagine what would happen in 10 years' time if every individual and every organization in the world is using centralized models. Those few companies that provide them would own the world's intellectual property. So there is no way this is going to happen. And us as Europeans have a responsibility not only for building trusted AI for the internal market, but also preserving human rights and providing option for the global community to consume these services in a safe way. And this can only be achieved if every individual and every organization can actually own their intellectual property. Thus, they need to own their own AI.
Thank you very much. I hope later you will tell us how we can get the capital that we need to make all these things possible, because we can talk here hours and then, yeah, all agree, but we need this to happen. We need these European companies to be there, and we need to apply power, not soft power. Now it's time for real power to make the world in the way the Europeans think that the world should be. Let me turn now to Ignacy, who is the person who will be supervising, I hope also assisting companies like iGenius in Spain and in a community of supervisors that is being formed as we speak. So what would be your key message, Ignacy? How would you react to the things that Marise and Julian already said?
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Leonardo, for this kind invitation, for being here today, and also for the rest of organizers. Well, my first point of view is that we are, as you probably agree with me, we are in a revolution, right? This is a revolution, and I would compare this revolution to the industrial revolution that we faced 200 years ago, right? So, in my belief, we are going to see artificial intelligence in the following years in everywhere, including all industries and all fields of society. So we have to be prepared for that. And from the European governments, we have the duty of promoting and fostering and incentivizing the introduction of these technologies in our societies, right? However, we have to be very aware, and we have to learn from history, as you were saying. I know that you are a great passionate of history, so this is a very good metaphor, right? We have to learn from history, and we cannot afford to leave anybody behind. We have to be inclusive, and we want to promote an ethical and humanistic artificial intelligence. So the good news is that we already have the AI Act in place, and I'm completely convinced that this very good instrument is going to help the governments, the companies, the society in general, in Europe, of course, to be sure that the artificial intelligence that we are introducing in our countries, in Europe, is, as I was saying before, a humanistic, a human-centered, and ethical technology. And this is the key point that we have to face, and we have to foster and incentivize. Thank you.
Thank you, Ignacy. Now we move to Marcus, who represents data protection authorities here. So we, data protection authorities, we are the difficult guys, right? So we always, business say, but you don't understand, and you are a barrier to innovation, and you are still in the 80s, the world has changed, data protection is incompatible with AI, etc., etc., etc. I think they are totally entitled to say these things, and in some cases they might be right, but in many cases they are not. I think what we are doing is valuable. But Marcus, you are in supervising in practice, and you are now having this new animal in the jungle, which is AI in Germany. How are you approaching this subject, and what is your advice to the things that have already been said here?
So, how am I approaching this subject? I'm just going to tell you. Like last week, for example, I listened to a podcast. It's called Machine Learning Street Talk. I can highly recommend it. Really interesting podcast where scientists in the field of AI, basically just present their papers, and they get the room. It's like sometimes 2 hours, 3 hours long. I don't get all of it, but I get some of it, and that's the most important bit. And so last week they talked about Google Alpha Evolve. That was in the news a little bit, but it was a project by Google DeepMind which I found really interesting. Because for those that are unfamiliar with it, it's basically a system that uses Gemini, the Google AI model, in an evolutionary way, is how they coined it. But basically, they are saying it evolves code. What it is doing, I think it takes a baseline program that is really complicated, that humans basically coded, and that they saw a problem in. They give that to the system, and they let it go for hours, days. It's basically not that way that how we use chatbots, where we wait for the input impatiently, but they just let it run and give an evaluating framework that they also, as humans, coded that would evaluate the answers and give feedback. And that way, this AI system could generate and have a feedback loop by itself, and then the scientists would look at the result. And what they found was that they had great discoveries. For example, in matrix mathematics, they had an actual discovery. They could make things more efficient. It was really incredible. And I heard all of that, and I thought, it's so interesting. They have not once mentioned agentic AI. Is it just bad marketing? What are they doing? Why did they not say the word, that they're all supposed to say? And then I got to thinking and tried to look beyond the hype. And I think the reason why they didn't say it is because it wasn't. They were involved in a major way. They thought long and hard about the problem that they were going to pose. They thought long and hard about the way that they would evaluate what the system is doing, and then they looked at the output. And the interesting bit is that they then said, well, we had all of these discoveries, but let me tell you one thing. There was a lot of nonsense and a lot of inconsistencies and inaccuracies that went out there. But because we humans were able to assess this, were able to find the nuggets, and they were great. So what I, as a GDPR regulator, got from this is the danger that we face is not necessarily only the AI takeover, how all these companies are trying to frame it, but really the real risk of mediocrity and shitification, how it's called. If we do not use these systems properly, but use them lazily to automate tasks that we don't want to think about, we get as much as we put in. And if it's little, we get little. And if we think that we can easily automate a lot and think that without human input, insight, oversight, we will get something out of it, I'm highly, highly doubtful of that. And Google Alpha Evolve, to me, was a great example that showed that if you put a lot of things in, you can also get valuable insights out. And this is where I see this opportunity for regulation, for data protection, for human in the loop, as they like to say, because it could be a positive motivator to guide us in the right direction. We have these principles of purpose limitation, which basically are there to make us think, how do we want to use this system? What should it be about? And I think that this is something that is often missing when we talk about agentic AI and how it's going to take care of all of our calendars and whatnot. I feel like if you look at what these systems are doing, it's often not working. And if you look at the AI Act and how it emphasizes risk management systems and quality management systems, this is what it's all about, that humans look at these systems and say, how do we want to use it? Is this good enough? So it is not only about human oversight or human in the loop, it's also about human insight. It's about what we can recognize as something good, because these machines hallucinate a lot, or only. And so this last promise of truly helpful AI isn't the last promise if we invest. And regulation, the way that it is now, can help us make these AI systems better, I feel. So this definition, the definition of success, is AI going to be successful, is of course something that is human-based, like what we find is successful, but we shouldn't let them define what is successful. Not any output is good. And so I think that that is the real opportunity. AI regulation should not just emphasize that it's all about human oversight and then come across as annoying and, oh no, the GDPR people come again, but really as an opportunity that we will have regulation that emphasizes that human insight is necessary and that the productivity of these systems and the value of the systems can be enhanced by the regulation that we have.
Thank you very much. Marisa, I turn to you now, asking you the lessons we can extract from the way the European Union dealt with the GDPR and the problems that the GDPR tried to address. You were there in the European Parliament, probably you participated in the negotiations. I guess we can say some things we got right, and I think we can also say some things we got wrong, because we are humans, we are not perfect. So what would be your advice? What are the things that we got right and the things that we got wrong, and how we can apply this to the new world of AI?
Yeah, thank you. Just for the record, I was not negotiating the GDPR. I think there are a lot of lessons learned from the GDPR, as there would be from any first mover in the legislative space. I think there are always lessons to be learned from regulation, and we should not pretend that that's a failure necessarily. Now, with the GDPR specifically, one of the lessons learned is that it was just hyped to incredible heights. You know, there were a number of years where any tech discussion with Europeans would be answered by, but we have the GDPR. And it kind of became, you know, like a caricature of itself. The second lesson that we can learn is that enforcement was too much of an afterthought. So this often happens, it's not unique to GDPR, but certainly it happened with GDPR as well. The law was announced as a big, major breakthrough, historic even before it was entered into force. And then the way it was supposed to be enforced was not resourced well enough. So if you look at the amount of cases that, I'm now telling your story, but that people like yourselves have to go through, it's just impossible. And there was also not enough of a sort of progressive notion in it to say the supervisors or regulators are allowed to say the biggest cases will be put on the top of the stack, because there is obviously a difference in impact between how the local swimming pool handles personal data versus how a major tech company handles personal data. And unlike what a lot of people in Silicon Valley think, the GDPR was not designed to go after tech companies. It was actually designed to harmonize rules between the EU member states and included public actors as much as private actors. And so often when I tell Americans that actually the GDPR applies to governments and to public organizations, that is news to them. So I think already some of the lessons of the GDPR have been helpful in the process of the Digital Services Act, the Digital Markets Act, because there is more thinking about the enforcement. But what is still missing is a bold leadership to say what kind of resources are necessary. And it's really hard for a supervisor to say that themselves, to say we want more money, because it will always be seen as self-serving, but effectively to hire the best talent, to learn about how data privacy is at stake in new technological contexts. You really need to have more resources than what data protection supervisors now have. Maybe one more other point that I've been thinking about more and more lately is that I think another sort of mistake made with the GDPR is that at a crucial moment for innovation, for AI development, the EU was thinking only about protecting personal data. It was not thinking as much about opportunities with large sets of data, how we could also use data in more innovative ways. So it was very focused on the protection of fundamental rights, which, you know, is a very legitimate goal, but it probably created a tunnel vision and limited the view of the broader relevance of data in a variety of ways, including to train AI models. And I think that that is obviously been a difficult lesson learned. Now, maybe allow me, because we have the benefit of sitting with two people who actually have to enforce the rules, something that I wanted to just try if we can discuss, because I think the other two speakers would also really have good insights on. How can supervisors and regulators regulate AI? Question mark. Because it is constantly changing. It is highly individualized. So every person has a different experience and will have a different experience in a week from now. Crucial information is in the hands of companies, and even the makers say it's unpredictable. So I would love to think, to have a sort of thinking out loud of how we can wrap our heads around that, because the AI Act was clearly designed on a risk-based model. It's very much in line with product liability, and I understand that from a political point of view. It's quote-unquote easier, even if it's hard, but it's more familiar in the model of regulation that we know. But questions around how is AI different? What does it mean for the very concept of regulation as we've known it, I believe need to be addressed. And I hope that those will not be the lessons we have to talk about, you know, 10 years from now on a podium and say, hey, we thought that the typical regulatory process as we've designed it could work with a technology like AI, instead of thinking now about what different capabilities or innovations in the oversight process, maybe new resources, you probably have a long list, we actually need. I don't know if you think this is relevant, but that's on my mind.
Thank you very much. I promise you that this would be interesting, and it's getting really, really interesting. So let's go back, Julian, to the question I put you before. So, and you also mentioned it, Marisha, the resources. We can talk hours, but if there is no resources, there's nothing we can do. By the way, I think the main role of enforcement authorities is to promote the right culture. I was very shocked when I joined the EDPS so many years ago, and Peter Hustings explained to me that our job was not to impose sanctions or to go after the other institutions. He told me, very Dutch, he told me, our role is to promote a culture of data protection in EU institutions. Because once you have this culture, you don't need the law. They are already following this culture. So I think this is probably, answering to your questions, is probably what we need to do. We promote a strong culture of compliance with a humanistic approach to AI, safety, and things like that. But going back to the important issue of resources, capital. So we don't have venture capitalists in Europe, markets like they have in the US, but we need to find a way to put this money to produce our own systems, our own infrastructures. What would be your advice? How do you advise that we should achieve that?
I think we should start with a very clear strategy, because when we talk about hype, the hype is on many levels. One of these is, when is AI going in production for real? If you call 10 organizations today, pick any size, and ask them at which scale they are using AI, you're going to have a very surprising answer. It's very limited. In most of the cases, it's under 1% of their overall operations. Because we are not telling the truth. I mean, as a society, we're trying to cure something that has not yet been built. It has not yet been doing damage. And I'm in favor of regulation. We actually have embraced regulation as a competitive advantage, because that's the way to prevent instead of curing. So the first thing that I believe we should do in order to find these resources is to build a strategy that instills trust. And it's very clear, because if you do that, for example, you don't think 2, 3 years, 5 years, or 10 years anymore. You think 20 years. You think 20 years because this is how long it is going to take before AI becomes as pervasive as we describe it today. The way we like to think it at iGenius, to describe it with a good analogy, is that we think of AI like a flying car, but it is currently a very useful electric car with limited autonomy, has less battery life than your smartphone, basically. Is it useful? Yes. Is it the future? Yes. It's not yet there. So what are we regulating? We are regulating, and this is the hard truth, I believe, the fact that this technology has one feature, hallucination. Hallucination is not the problem, it's the only feature it has. Hallucination at scale enables generative AI to be what it is. So this is the closest thing to chemistry that we have ever built. And it took us, as humankind, more than 2,000 years to make chemistry a science. Because we have to, do a lot of experimentation and regulate it and so on and so forth. So it's the same thing for AI. So once you have that hard truth, then for Europe, what this means is we have time. We are not out of the game. So we need to think responsibly of this. Also in terms of how many resources do we need? Do we need more resources that we're currently using? Yes. Do we need 500 billion supercomputers in 24 months? Absolutely no, because that would be a waste of money. Because these AI models do not need so much compute. They need the right amount of compute for the right stage of development. So I think that Europe needs to be a third mover in the AI game. And I will close also with how I believe we should approach capital. But I think being a third mover means let OpenAI to pay the bills for R&D, let Google and the hyperscalers to actually leverage their competitive advantage of scale to monetize it. This happened with the personal computer, a company named Olivetti in 1964. They announced the Programma 101, which was adopted in the US, European technology becoming the first POS system in the US. So 40,000 businesses adopted it in their commercial activity. But then HP had more scale and they killed them. Then Apple came as a third mover and they put a screen on top of that box, of that desktop computer, and they won the market. So let's be the Apple of this generation. Let's wait for the right time to put a screen on top of the box. Because we have no other choice. Even if we wanted to be a second mover, we don't have hyperscalers, we don't have capital, it's a dream. So how can we unlock then enough capital so that it fits responsibly? First of all, our strategy should not be European nationalism. This is not about, when we talk about sovereign AI, and at iGenius we build AI models for regulated industries and AI agents for regulated industries. And the way we pitch these agents, this is not just about Europe. Sovereign AI, it's about an organization being able to govern itself, to have that fundamental right. And this is true for an organization in Europe, in Asia, in North America, and so on and so forth, and in every part of the world. So a concentration of power in 12 companies, it doesn't mean Silicon Valley. It can be anywhere, right? So I think that that's the first thing. Once you have that in place, once that strategy is clear, we are relaxed, we have time, we have a clear timeline, we have clear goals, where do we take the money? Well, we have one of the biggest economies in the world. Europe has 35 trillion euros in liquid assets, of which about 10 trillions is cash sitting in bank accounts. If you look at how much cash the US has in bank accounts, it's less than 10 trillion, because most of it is on paper. So why are we lacking capital? Because our capital markets suck. So how do we elevate our capital markets? We cannot think of solving the fragmentation of Europe by speaking one language. That's impossible. This is what we're trying to do. We're trying to, when I say one language, that can be software, can be regulation. It's not just about verbal spoken language, right? It's impossible to cancel culture in 27 countries and standardize it. So there you go. AI is the first opportunity for solving this problem as a translator of complexity. You can have someone in France, Spain, Italy, Germany, and so on and so forth, speak their own language and their own culture, and use AI as a tool. This is what it is, a tool to transact. So what this means is that to elevate the capital markets, we need to bring our industrial champions. We need to turn our industrial champions into tech companies because we have already lost the game of hyperscalers. We cannot build hyperscalers overnight. We need to take those large industrial champions that we already have and turn them into tech companies. So you take the 50 largest companies in Europe and you turn them into tech companies. This means that you're going to create hyper-growth. Hyper-growth attracts money, not just from Europe, but from the rest of the world. And then you're going to have these companies being valued on par with their counterparts across the ocean. This is the wave that startups like iGenius need to grow. Capital is not a matter of public money or VC money. It's a matter of having a market to whom you sell. So the first problem is that there is no market in Europe. And the second problem is that, unfortunately, I suspect, based on these 8 years of experience, even when it will start to exist, and it will happen in the next 5 years, European companies will need to prove they can succeed elsewhere before they are being successful in Europe. Because how the system works, right? It's part of our culture, of our nature. We're not risk takers in Europe. So imagine the CIO at a Fortune 50 company in Europe that buys a European technology. What risks are they taking? What are the stakes for them, right? So if you look at the regulation, the environment around us, it has some pros because it protects our fundamental rights, but it has also some cons because it doesn't enable that freedom of experimentation and risk. So I think this is a very sophisticated conversation, so we need to be very thoughtful and take time. The answer to where we're going to find capital is patience. There is no way to bend the rules. There is no way to bend time. We need to believe in it. We need to trust the fact that Europe can make it. We need to be analytical about building this trust with numbers and not just with dreams, and then just hard work.
Wow, I think this is something that normally we don't hear in this kind of conferences. We are talking about the law, we are talking about fundamental rights, but sometimes we are missing the elephant in the room. I think we got some good ideas now. Ignacy, from your perspective, you also being in business, I saw you nodding for many things that he said. How do you think we can help with the little resources we got? Because unfortunately, we got very little resources. AI authorities at the moment. I got, after begging around everybody in the European Union, I got 8 people. And I don't know how many people I will get for next year. So really, we are very small. And Ignacy can tell you they are just starting. But with the little resources we have, for example, sandboxes capacity, how can we help from create public value from AI authorities?
Well, sandboxes, this is a very interesting question, and I love it because we are pioneering this effort in Europe. As you probably know, there is an obligation for the member states in the AI Act that from August 2026, every state member state has to have in place a sandbox to help companies to foster, the regulation in artificial intelligence. So we are doing our homework. As I was saying before, we are pioneering this homework, and the obligation starts in August 2026, but in December 2024, we put in place the first sandbox the first regulatory sandbox in Europe. So the idea of the Spanish government is to help SMEs. Spain, as many other countries in Europe, we are a country of SMEs. 99% of our industrial tissue are SMEs, and we want to facilitate their lives to all our companies. So one of the ways of doing that is putting in place our sandbox in artificial intelligence to help companies to work on their red tape in related to the AI Act, right? So we are telling our companies, hey, if you wish, obviously this is optional, if you wish, you can go to our sandbox, you can run your software applications that contain artificial intelligence in high-risk fields, and if everything is compliant to the law, we are going to help you with all the red tape that is involved in the AI Act. So by doing this, we are helping a lot of the companies. So we are starting now with a pilot of the sandbox. So this is not the real final sandbox. This is just a pilot, because everybody's learning. We are learning, the companies are learning, everybody's learning now. So we selected 12 companies, and with these 12 companies, we are doing this first pilot of the sandbox. And the idea is that by the end of this year, we are putting in place the real sandbox that the AI Act tell us to do, right? So that will be probably more than half a year before the obligation. And well, we are also serving as an example for the rest of the colleagues in Europe, for the rest of the countries in Europe. And well, we are explaining our experience in the subgroups that the European Commission has put in place for this proposal. We are explaining the experience, and we hope that this helps not only to the Spanish companies, but also to the rest of the European companies, but serving as an example for other member states.
Thank you very much. I think this morning I was talking to the head of AI unit in my office, and I think we're going to go and visit you and see with our own eyes this sandbox, because you're pioneering, because we also have to develop our own sandbox for the EU institutions and bodies, because we will have big agencies like Frontex, Europol. They will also develop AI solutions, and they also need a sandbox. So we are late, really, in thinking about these things. There was something that Mariche said before that is really resonated very much on me when you said that enforcement was an afterthought when we did the GDPR. I think you got it absolutely right. And I think we have to learn, and we have to be humble and learn from our mistakes. Now, I'm afraid that with AI, governance has been an afterthought. It's not something that has been properly thought when considering AI Act, and it's crucial, I think, to be able to achieve what we want to achieve. As Julian said, we need to have a clear strategy, and then for that you need to have the right actors and the right governance in place. So, Marcus, from your authority, you've been doing, that's why I got to know you, that you've been doing very thorough research, comparing governance structures in the field of AI in Europe, and the possible interface with the governance structures that we have under data protection and GDPR. Could you please share with all of us some of your findings, and what would be your recommendations?
Sure, glad to. And I will then definitely answer your question, but then pivot and hope that we can all talk about the question of how do we actually regulate AI, because I think that that is important, and I want to answer that. But it will definitely lead into it, I promise. So basically, yes, I did research, and to be frank, what prompted all of this research was that in Germany, especially in Germany, in Brussels, and in Europe we have it as well, but this kind of notion that data protection is becoming annoying. And in Germany it is quite prominent. Just to illustrate how this narrative plays in Germany, we have had a commission that was had prominent members of like former constitutional court judges, former politicians that were really famous. Some would recognize these names, and they said the main problems of Germany, they are partly data protection and two other things that were named in the same sentence. And it was fire safety and building preservation and data privacy. Those three things are what is holding Germany back. That makes linguistic sense in German, because data privacy is Datenschutz, fire safety is Brandschutz, and building preservation is Denkmalschutz. So it makes sense in that way, but that's where we are being, that's who we're being put up against. Like that's the kind of impression that we're getting. And that sentiment extends to AI regulation and AI governance, and how in Germany they are thinking about which kind of authority should regulate AI. And so this led me to wonder, how do other member states do this? Do they feel the same way? Do they ignore the DPAs because they are building preservation authorities in that sense? And I looked at all the draft laws that are out there, Spain too, which just recently published their draft law still, I think. I don't know if it was passed yet. The draft law, you're working on that, exactly. So the funny thing is, 2nd of August this year, we have to be ready. And I don't think there's one final law in all of Europe. That's the first thing. No one has named, and I hope this is right, their AI market surveillance authority, except for you guys. You're the only ones. Congrats. And so some countries, like Luxembourg, Netherlands, they have DPAs as the central authority. Very central role, they're going to coordinate. They have other authorities as well, product authorities and financial services authorities, but the DPAs are strong. Then we have Nordic countries in Ireland, and they have a fully decentralized approach, sector by sector by sector. They are going to have like 8 to 10 market surveillance authorities all in charge of AI. This is partly going into like, how are we going to regulate this? Like definitely not alone. A lot of people are going to regulate this. And then we have nations like Italy, Spain, Poland, who establish new dedicated authorities just for AI, but they are also noticing that the AI Act is focusing on cooperation. So you as well will have to work with the DPAs who will be in charge of especially government use AI, government sectors like law enforcement, migration, justice administration, and elections, for example. Yes, please.
Let me interrupt just a moment. In Spain, we have 56 authorities surveilling artificial intelligence, and we are just coordinating them. Because we have the...
56?
Yeah, we have your equivalent to the landers, the Comunidad.
Oh, you do that too?
So
nice.
we also have many data protection officers and many things. We have 56, so we are coordinating them.
That's going to be a lot. Okay, that only goes to the point that I'm making, because while these specific structures may vary, we will have to collaborate a lot. And it's funny because Germany, you know, the country has already been mentioned that already has a lot of authorities. If you look at DPAs, if you look at any other thing, we love to have a lot of authorities because we have a federal system which has its reasons. And now they saw this and they thought, okay, not this time. We're going to have one authority. And they chose one as a proposal. It's not yet done since nobody has named any yet. But they thought of basically not choosing only one authority mainly, but also excluding the DPAs altogether. They shouldn't be part of it at all, because they hinder innovation. And that was kind of the interesting point, that Germany, trying to be more like other countries, is now isolating itself yet again. It's an interesting process, but in the end, the main thing that we have to get out here is, how are we going to regulate AI? We're going to regulate it by having a network of authorities that have never worked together before. Are we going to regulate AI? And I think that this pivots to basically how this is going to go about. So, of course, coordination is going to be the single biggest operational challenge. It's not going to be about DPAs if they have like enough funding. Are they even going to be able to take up the big players? It's going to be about us organizing ourselves, mainly, in the first place. 56 authorities. Wow. And so basically having more meetings won't cut it. There has to be a fundamental transition in the nature of work, and especially for DPAs, if they're involved in this kind of work and if they work as market surveillance authorities. And this major shift is going to be that we will not be able to always only look at data processing. These little things. Boop, 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 one data process, another, regulate this, regulate that. No, it's going to become about products. And what does that mean? People always say it's product regulation, but what it basically means is that you have a product as a use case, and then you look at all the processes that work up to the product. And what you then do is look at the quality management and risk management systems, which basically come from product law. But what that in the end all means is you have ISO norms, which in amazing detail describe what you have to do to be compliant and what kind of processes you have to take. And then you check these boxes, and if you do, you have a conformity assumption in like the most basic way I'm explaining this right now. But already this approach is so different from data protection, where we were rarely able to define a target state and say, you do this way and you will be compliant. No, what we said is, that is an interesting use case you have, we see the following problems. And then a company would try to amend these problems, and then we would say, that is an interesting use case, we still see this problem. It's really difficult if you have a principle-based regulation to define what the target state of a data processing should be. This is really different when it comes to product regulation. And that was the point, or the learning that we had from the GDPR to coming to the AI Act. But this is a point also about the cooperation, because if we have similar standards, if we have similar ISO norms that influence how we regulate, this means that it doesn't matter how many, in an ideal world, it doesn't matter how many authorities you have if the rule book is the same. And I think that is the hope, at least, that's how we manage this cooperation. So what this means is also that we have to learn this, and we have to look at technical details and be ready, even as DPAs, to define a target state and be okay with letting a product on the market and taking on the risk of letting it on the market and not always holding it back. And I think that this approach might also impact how GDPR is being applied. Because if, for example, we have ISO norms which force us to basically say, yes, okay, you have checked all the boxes, this should be in line, then it would be really difficult to say, you know what, data minimization principle, we actually want you to use less data. If the ISO norm says for a quality management system or for quality training, for example, you have to use X amount of data because you have to test this, that, and biases, then it will be really difficult for DPAs to say, oh, this is too much. So the idea of what actually is necessary under GDPR will change. The idea of what is a legitimate interest might change if we have ISO norms and they say what is expected of you. And as ISO norms are part of European law, through the conformity assumption that the AI Act gives, this will change how we see legitimate interest. There are many little things that will change about the application of GDPR, and I think that this will mainly go to the point that the second goal of GDPR will lead a more prominent life, the free movement of data. And I think that this is a tremendous opportunity, a tremendous challenge to learn, to cooperate, and to try to do this. But in the end, it's going to be about cooperation and learning a totally new set of laws.
Thank you very much. I'm a terrible moderator because I don't know how much time left we got. I hope we still have 10 minutes. Fantastic, thank you. And now I think I would like to open the floor to not just to put questions to our panelists, of course, but also to share your thoughts and to bring new ideas to the debate. So who would like to break the ice and come with some question or a remark? Over there at the end, please.
Thank you. I would just like to make, and it's not really a question, but a remark for Marcus. And well, first I would like to say thanks for the great panel. And you have been mentioning several times ISO standards. I would like to say, as one of the contributors to the European harmonized standards, that ISO standards won't give you really the conformity with the Act. So we should really focus on the European standards that are being built by Sentinel Act for that. So just that as a clarification.
But won't Sentinel just adopt the ISO standards? Isn't that my understanding?
No. So, of course, we are using a lot of the information and great work that is being done in ISO, and we collaborate. But at Sentinel, we are developing different standards for risk management, for conformity assessment, or quality management. So, yeah, they will be different, and those will be the ones that will really give you the conformity. So, yeah, just for clarification. So
yeah, no, it's a great clarification. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The lady there in the corridor, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. As you allowed comments, I'm representing Data Supervisor Authority, and I would just want to comment on what Marcus as well has said about the aim of the GDPR, because I was negotiating GDPR, and there was two aims: protection of the people and free flow of data. But for me, unfortunately, what do I see in some heads and weights how we are going, that we are forgetting this free flow. We are very concentrated on protecting, which is good. But then I think that we have as well thinking about the comfortable life of people and how they see our rules, and if we give us DPA's guidelines on 50, 60, 70 pages and only privacy lawyers can understand them, this is not the aim of GDPR. And I think that this requires quite a lot of the cooperation between the DPAs and now it depends on the countries, between the artificial intelligence, the supervisory agencies and the companies, in order to really create these products and how we will create this something good for the society and not bad. Because if we just go in as prohibiting everything, I don't think that we will gain as a society at all. And this is another thing what you as well mentioned in the panel, resources. Because to do it, this is very challenging, this is open, and we would like to go in. But I represent this supervisory authority for the 34 people, and for the next year I will be responsible as well for the IE and sandboxes, and great, but where do you have the resources? And the resources has not come in from the government, because government says, if you have more resources, you will come to us as well. So it's better to have like this. So there's a lot of the challenges as well for the DPA, and this conference as well. I have quite a lot of the criticism towards the DPA, and I can understand it and I can take it. But I think it's that we all have to understand where we want to go, what will be this goal when we are wanting to go in Europe, and privacy, and as well our comfortable life. And that's why, we need to cooperate between the DPAs, cooperate with each other, and be more transparent and open towards each other. Thank you.
So just two quick things.
Go ahead.
Yes, one major thing is going to be that it's going to be our job to translate these regulations to the people, and we will have to advise, which is something that DPAs in Germany at least had been reluctant to do, because they thought that advising is not part of the program, basically, because in the GDPR didn't really say that, but in the Act that's different. On the free movement of data, just really quick, Heike Kraneburg did a great article in the EDPL, it's free access open, it's online, about also how the CJU has heavily influenced this problem of the free flow of data not being an objective that can be enforced, because the CJU case law doesn't really use it in their case law. They used to do it, but now they kind of have stopped. But that might change because of the Act. Great article.
Thank you very much. You came back to the same point I did just when we started. Our role is not to protect or to even the name data protection. I think we should consider changing it, because it's negative. And actually, as you very well explained, our discipline is not only about limiting, it's also about empowering and sharing the data and things like that. So maybe when we change the name of the EDPS, we can also change the name of our discipline. But indeed, when I was recruited by the Commission for the Data Protection Unit 26 years ago, it was in the Internal Market Directorate General. It was about the free flow of data. And then this, how do you call it, tunnel vision, we started to focus only on fundamental rights, and we missed the point that is about many other things that also create public value. And this is what the business is all about. Okay, so we have the time for one question, one final question or remark, or otherwise we let this fantastic audience to go and have a cup of coffee. So I take the opportunity to thank the speakers for coming here. Some of you have come from far away. Some of you have spent a lot of time to be here, and probably money. So thank you so much for joining this EDPS panel. And thank you all so much for being here. I hope you found this entertaining and helpful for you. Thank you very much.